Welcome back to the Rain Race podcast and another IMSA race week. Of course, I'm your host, GT Rain, and off to my right for like the 40th something time maybe on this podcast at this
Oof.
point. Off in the Esses stew. I'm sure you're excited for this week as much as I am. How are we doing tonight?
I sure am. It's always a good night when you know there's a race waiting for you at the end of the week. So, race week at Sebring, you know, it really doesn't get much better. I guess it could be better if I was going to Sebring, which you are going to Sebring.
I am,
Um, but with that comes the storm before the race, which is packing and everything.
which has not been started yet. And the flight tomorrow is, I'll be on a plane ideally 24 hours from now. So nothing out of the ordinary for me, if you know anything about me at all. But that is all for after this show. We'll try to keep this show a little bit brief, just so that I can do that. I know you have some video stuff to work on to get out before Sebring as well. So both of us a bit in crunch mode here. But of course, we do get a pretty stacked episode of things to discuss. In the meantime, we have the WEC season opener at Qatar to give a quick recap to. Got the Le Mans entry list out last week, a little bit later than usual, but nonetheless, 62 cars to go over there. And then finally, of course, wrap it all off with a Sebring preview, including our coveted predictions. And of course, it being a live podcast, if we do have some time at the end of the episode, we'll try to hit as many of those questions as we can. You can leave those on YouTube, and we'll try to get to those at the end. I want to start things off here. I want to talk about Qatar. It was about a week and a half ago. Tried to change the structure of the times for this episodes. With me going to Sebring this weekend, won't have a show next week, so we're a week late to the punch on this one. Actually, that race was a week and a half ago at this point, considering it was on a Friday. Try to catch as much of that race as I could in between bouts of work on a Friday, with that race starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, my time zone and yours as well, and then ending at 4 p.m. It wasn't ideal, to say the least, but tried to bring in as much of that as I could with it being a full 10-hour race. I don't know. How about you? How did you get around to watching that race? I know it's a lot more, let's say, difficult to access in Canada than it is over here in the U.S.
Well, I had to bite the bullet, and I bought the WEC TV, so I was able to watch the whole thing. I had it on in the background, so I didn't necessarily catch everything that was going on. And honestly, I mean, when I was about to hop on tonight, I was like trying to jog my memory on what actually happened in the race. As you said, it's over a week and a half ago. We're approaching 2 weeks ago, and the mind's getting a little bit fuzzy, but there's some key pieces that I remember. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about Qatar a little bit, and then hop into the next exciting race that we have in front of us.
Yeah. Well, let's just start it with some of the highlights from that race. I think the first thing, really, what a race for Ferrari with that 499P. 1, 2, 3 finish there. They were strong all weekend, put it on pole. Didn't really look back the entire race. And you can't say that for some of the races they had previously. They've been on pole a handful of times in the World Endurance Championship. It is worth noting that this was the first win outside of Le Mans for that fully factory effort of cars 50 and 51. Like I said, didn't really look back too much that race. They had the pace of the field, and that's what they needed to do. Ferrari's been very vocal from the beginning of this season, saying they wanted this to be a championship contention season for them. They were a little bit short on that last year. I would say they were probably third best last year behind Porsche and Toyota. This year, getting off the bat very strong right away. 1, 2, 3 finish with that Privateer 83 car in second place. So really walking out of the championship with the top in both the main constructors and then also the privateer standings as well. So first 1, 2, 3 finish we've seen in the World Endurance Championship since, or for a manufacturer that is, since the same race last year with Porsche getting a 1, 2, 3 with the addition of Jota on the podium there as well last year. I forgot which Ferrari you picked for that race. Was it the 50?
It was the 51, I believe, because
Okay.
I don't think my prediction came true per usual. So, but they were quick all weekend, and you alluded to it, like Ferrari was quick obviously all weekend. They had to be quick to get a 1, 2, 3. But also worth giving a shout out here is, BMW looked really, really strong in this race too. Toyota, maybe it's a little bit of, fans are just looking for somebody else to cheer for at this point. We've seen Toyota win so much over the years. And maybe the talks about them have died down a fair amount, but they had a strong run at times here as well. Ended up coming home with a fifth and a sixth place finish. And I know we're going to talk about it here in a second as one of the big moments of this race, but Cadillac, probably more of a question of what could have been, but again, great speed throughout the weekend. If this keeps up, I mean, and then even add in the cars that didn't have speed that we expected to, specifically the Porsches. If Qatar is an indication of anything of what's to come this season, it's going to be a really fun hypercar battle to watch. Like, there's good luck predicting it from here on out.
Yeah, I think that touches a lot of what we were saying in the preview show last episode, which was it's very difficult to predict this season. You have way more teams where this is their second, third season with the car now. That big advantage that Toyota had in 2023 with all the experience they had with that car is sort of equalized by this point. Ferrari is right up there with them. Porsche, of course, last year shown that they can take the fight to Toyota now. Ferrari is in the mix. BMW is now showing that sort of pace as well. You mentioned Toyota specifically. I think the main thing for Toyota here that I would say is they really capitalized on what they had. They didn't have the strongest car at this race. I don't think anybody's really disputing that. But they were able to maximize the car that they had with them. And when you talk about a championship run, this is why Toyota wins championships. I've said this so many times before, but the season really comes down to, number one, how many races are you going to win? But then number two, how consistent is your season going to be? Last year we were looking at Porsche, the number 6 car, phenomenal consistency with that car. And it won them a championship. So if Toyota can have any indication to bring out of this race, it's that they still have that consistency. They still have the ability to get results out of that car, despite the fact that the raw pace might not be there every single race. So I would say a great showing for them.
A very Toyota race.
Yeah, definitely. Was also, of course, the debut for the Aston Martin Valkyrie. Lot of talking points going into the race for them. Of course, it was one of the main things I was looking forward to seeing. How are they going to get around? Are they going to get both cars to the finish of that race? Ultimately did not. Car 007 retired with a transmission failure, but the car 009 did finish the race, albeit quite a few laps down, and they did have issues earlier on in the race with the door. Actually flew off the car. No exception to some of the issues other manufacturers have had. Proton had an issue with the door last year. Of course, Ferrari, with the leading 50 car at Le Mans last year, had some drama with the door late in the race. But first race out for the Aston, sort of getting those, we'll just call them
gremlins.
Yeah, gremlins. Those early gremlins out of the way. Their next big test, of course, is going to be Sebring this weekend. You got a track that is a lot more physical than the largely smoothed out Qatar. It's also 2 hours longer, of course, and they're only going to have one car there. So I think Sebring is going to be the main endurance test for that car. For Qatar, I got to say the car pretty much performed about as I was expecting. It definitely would have been nicer for them to get both cars to the finish. But I wasn't expecting miracles out of them that weekend, to be honest with you. I think what they can walk out of with there is they had a lot of data coming out of that race. So carry that on throughout the rest of the IMSA and the WEC seasons. Perhaps later on in the season, they'll have a car to fight with.
Yeah. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there with the Aston. I would have hoped that they could have got both cars to the finish, like you said, especially at a track that is, a smooth, a much more smooth experience than they're going to have this weekend at Sebring. But regardless, like 295 laps out of the 009 and 181 out of the 007. So, you got 16 hours of runtime between the two cars in this one, which is nothing to sneeze at. So, hopefully they can learn some things from Qatar, apply them to Sebring, and we'll talk about what their likely reasonable goal is for Sebring, but yeah, it's not going to be a podium. It's going to be again finish the race and get more data under their belt like they did here at Qatar.
Well, maybe if we get another late race bowling session like we had in 2023, then a podium's not out of the picture. But I don't know.
I don't think we're hoping for that, though.
No, I'm not hoping for it, but I wouldn't rule it out. Of course, you touched on this a couple minutes ago. I would say, honestly, maybe the main talking point for the entire race was Hertz Team Jota, Cadillac. What could have and probably should have been for that team. They were really the only other manufacturer that had a chance at taking it to Ferrari. Of course, they made their way up to a 1-2 about 4 hours into the race due to some pit strategies and a safety car coming out in their favor, and didn't really get very far with it. Car number 12, Alex Lynn, running into the back of the 38 car, which was driven by Jenson Button at the time. Jenson was accelerating and braking hard, trying to get some heat in the brakes after that safety car period. Teammates right behind him, complete miscommunication or misunderstanding from Alex Lynn, runs right into the back of them. Both cars have to pit. They both have damage. You got to say it. This is one of the all-time sports car racing blunders, at least in the modern era, especially when you have a team with a track record as good as Jota's, as successful as they've been in the past. Do I think they had the ultimate pace to win this race and to take it to both, I'll say both, really three Ferraris? Probably not, to be honest with you, but definitely you got to talk about both cars being in the top five, I think. Yeah. And for them to walk out of this race the way it went, obviously they're going to forget this one, or they're going to want to forget this one at least. Stewards did end up putting the blame on the number 12, the following car of Alex Lynn. Car behind's responsibility, I suppose. But I don't know. The way I saw it, it's just way too aggressive when you're leading the race and your teammates behind you to be making sudden moves like that. And I can certainly see how it caught Alex Lynn out.
Yeah, just unfortunate all around. It's we're gonna see the replay of this on motorsport fail videos for years to come. Now it's we're not gonna stop seeing it for a while, and it's unfortunate for Alex. It's unfortunate for the entire Hertz Team Jota team. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing really that they can do other than put their head down and go out and perform in the next one. Because if they come out and they perform, where's the next race?
Imola.
So if they come out and perform like they did here in Qatar at Imola, then they're going to be on for another good result. And it's unfortunate, but it's a long season. There's still time to make up for it. We have double points at Le Mans. These were 1.5 times point, yeah. I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so that does hurt a little bit, but there's still plenty of time to make up a points deficit this season. So it regardless, still impressive. Like their first race out with the Cadillac, we talked about it a little bit at the Rolex. Are the teams that are returning to manufacturers or switching manufacturers in the off season, how were they going to perform? And we saw some pretty impressive results. I think you have to say that this was a pretty, even though the end result wasn't there with an unfortunate incident, they still looked really, really strong in their first race with Cadillac.
Yeah, I think that's the main the main takeaway here. Is they were strong. They did have potential. Again, I don't personally think they were going to win that race regardless. But if this is the worst that we see, hopefully out of that team this season, then we still have some nice things to pull out of that race for them. And hopefully, of course, with the rest of the season in front of them, have plenty of time to try to work up that deficit. I think the last thing I want to touch on from Qatar specifically is how good LMGT3 was there. You talked about how unpredictable the hypercar class was. LMGT3 was even more. It was a race where we had 6 manufacturers finish in the top, or 6 different manufacturers in the top 6 at the end of the race. Incredible battle in the final stint of the race between the TF Sport Corvette and one of the United McLarens. Actually ended up being the closest finish in the history of that class. That what it would be on 10 race history of that class now,
Huh.
Or 9th race, I believe, for that class that debuted last year. But nonetheless, closest finish between the top 2 there.
Just under half a second.
Yeah. Great race overall, I would say. It was very difficult to pick out a favorite manufacturer for the entire race. We saw Lexus, you mentioned in the preview episode, you think this was going to be a strong result for Lexus. They were fairly strong there, especially compared to the pace that they had a year ago. So I think the LMGT3 class is a lot more open this year than we were talking about a year ago. And there's not really a standout favorite, at least yet, which was a little bit harder to say after the first race last year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lexus. Corvette was obviously strong. The team that ended up coming home in second, United Autosports and their McLarens, they looked really strong all weekend, which is kind of the first race that I can recall where they were seriously in contention for the win. It seemed like, they had the pace to win. So it was impressive to see that. Impressive to see Lexus do well. It's a really spread out, like manufacturer wise, you don't have a repeat manufacturer in the top 6. You have to go back to 7th where you find McLaren before you start doubling up on it. So it wasn't like in hypercar where it was a Ferrari 1, 2, 3, a race kind of dominated by them. There were multiple cars, like half the class had the pace to obviously, realistic podium pace. We had Aston Martin and the 27 that were up there for a good chunk of the race as well. So, LMGT3, it seems like the gap, if there was a gap, a bit of a gap there last year, has certainly been closed up. And you said it perfectly. This was a really fun race to watch in this class.
Yeah, and I definitely see some more of that coming in the future races, especially at Imola, which I'm looking forward to a lot. I think the thing I'll wrap up the Qatar section with here is a stat that I saw from at WEC Data over on X. Very interesting one, which is that in the 93 World Endurance Championship races before Qatar this year, every single one of them featured either a Porsche or an Aston Martin on one of the class podiums at the end of the race. Qatar was the first race since 2012 when the championship began where that didn't happen. So, bit of an interesting stat there. One that I definitely would not have had the brain to pick out. But a good shout there. We didn't have a single 963 Valkyrie, Porsche 911, or Aston Martin Vantage on the podium at the end of that
You didn't
race.
even have them in the top 5.
Yeah.
It was a really rough race for them.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
We do need to shout out. You picked the winning LMGT3.
I did. Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't want to gloat in that too much, but yeah, I think we finally, we threw enough darts at the board and one finally stuck.
Credit where credit is due.
That's the only one I'm going to get this season.
Everybody gets one, right?
Oh, yeah. I do want to move things on here. I want to talk a little bit about the Le Mans entry list, which came out last week. This is, of course, another capacity grid 62 cars. On the entry list for the race this year. 21 hypercars in the race this year, down from 23 last year. But I do want to do a callback to only 3 years ago in 2022, where we had 5 hypercars starting the race there. So take what you get, bask in it, and enjoy the show, because we're still 4 times as many cars as we had on the grid only 3 years ago. Um, we do have the addition of the number 4 Porsche Penske, which is for the third year in a row. We'll be having that third Porsche Penske car on the grid. This one was a little bit more shut case, though, because, of course, they did win the IMSA championship last year. We'll be seeing some of the IMSA drivers in that car at Le Mans this year in car number 4. Also have the addition, finally, I might add, of Wayne Taylor Racing in the number 101 Cadillac. This is a team who has been trying to get on the grid at Le Mans for years now. Wayne switched allegiances in IMSA to try to get a car to race in the World Endurance not in the World Endurance Championship as a whole, but in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Switched back to Cadillac, and now is finally getting that chance to race there in the hypercar class. Really excited to see what that team's going to be able to do there. Of course, you don't need to dig far into their IMSA pedigree to see how successful they've been over here. I'm really going to be excited to see them on the grid at Le Mans this year. And of course, for the third year running, we also have the return of Wayland Cadillac Racing, their Wayne Taylor Racing sort of rivals / partners over in IMSA, depending on how you want to look at it, in that 311 Cadillac. 17 LMP2 cars in the race, majority of those coming over from the European Le Mans Series, but I also do have a couple coming over from the Asian Le Mans Series and IMSA as well. A couple of those auto invites I want to go over. RLR M Sport is racing for finishing first in the European Le Mans Series LMP3 Championship last year. Inter Europol has 2 cars, one of them for finishing second in the ELMS LMP2 Championship, and one of them for Nick Boole winning the Jim Truman Award in IMSA last year for being that top LMP2 bronze driver, winning that LMP2 championship in IMSA last year. Algarve Pro Racing, sort of known as CrowdStrike by APR and IMSA, finished first in the ALMS LMP2 championship last year. We had AF Corsa for finishing first in the ELMS LMP2 Pro Am championship, and then the AO by TF for finishing first in the overall LMP2 championship in the European Le Mans Series. Course, all Oricas again. It is a full stacked field of Orica 07s. We won't be seeing any of the Dalaras, Multimatics, or Ligiers on the grid, unfortunately, but 17 cars there that are all on essentially equal footing, and we'll see which one comes out on top. LMP2 is usually always a bit of a mixed bag of who you want to pick. There's tons of talent in that class at that race, tons of different teams to pick from, and I think that's going to be a challenge for us come this June.
And of those 17, 9 of them are Pro-Am entries. So
yeah,
you take those 17 and you break them down even further into those 2 kind of subclasses.
Mm-hmm. And then the largest class in the race this year will be the LMGT3 class. Of course, we have the 18 cars that are racing their full season. We also have some additional auto invites in that class as well. You have the AWA Corvette. Big shout out there. Rolex 24 winners this year in IMSA. Ore Fidani won the Bob Aiken Award last year in GTD that he picked up at Petit Le Mans for the championship last year, or at the championship race last year, I should clarify. We have a third Iron Lynx Mercedes for winning the European Le Mans Series LMGT3 championship. I forgot what they called it over there. A third Manthey Porsche for winning the Asian Le Mans Series GT championship last year. We have Ziggo Sport Tempesta, which is formerly known, or maybe more commonly known as Sky Tempesta, which was their former name, for being the top bronze team to finish in the GT World Challenge Europe Championship last year. It's the second year in a row we've had an invite for that championship. And then we also have the addition of the Kessel Racing and Richard Mille AF Corsa Ferraris in LMGT3 as well. Both of those cars coming over from the European Le Mans Series.
Some strong classes here.
Yeah.
62 cars total, like you said, 24, 17, and 21. That's a healthy grid. There's some strong entries in all of these classes. It'll be interesting to see how some of these LMP2 entries sort of fill out. Those are the only ones that really have spots that have some question marks sort of beside them on the entry list. But some strong programs here across all of the classes, and man, looking forward to looking forward to Le Mans now.
Yeah, and I did want to pull up the um, reserve list as well, which I had forgotten to pull up before the show. But we do have 6 reserve entries as well to highlight for this race. The first of which being a second Proton Porsche 963, as they were last year as well. Should any of those cars in any class pull out, they'll be the first car to get bumped up. But Tristan Vautier is the only listed driver in that car right now. And then we have the 86 GR Racing Ferrari, an LMGT3, the DKR Engineering Orica and LMP2. We have Duquesne, also in LMP2, the JMW Motorsport Ferrari in the LMGT3 class, and then Vector Sport in LMP2 as well. So a lot of teams on that reserve list that usually have been pretty stable teams at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Some of them getting bumped down to that reserve list this year, just showing how stacked the lineup is for this year and how much competition we're going to have in that race. Very much looking forward to it. We're about 3 months away now, and I'm counting down the days. Under 100 days officially until 2025 Le Mans. It's going to be very interesting, by the way, how we end up doing a podcast for that, because I will be over 6 hours ahead in France. So we'll have to have a discussion at some point on how we're going to handle that.
I'll schedule a work meeting.
Yeah, there you go. And we'll have to get a little creative with that one. Anything else you want to touch on for the Le Mans entry list, though?
No, I think that's about it. We'll go over it more in the lead up to Le Mans, I'm sure. But yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how some of these LMP2 entries sort of fill out, and we're going to be in for another good race.
Yeah, we still have plenty of driver confirmations to be announced there. We'll be hearing many of those over the next month or two, I'm sure. So stay tuned. We'll go over some of those more notable announcements as they come through. But for now, I want to spend most of the rest of the episode talking about the 12 Hours of Sebring, of course, this weekend. And then at the end, we'll try to hit some of your questions. Of course, the WeatherTech Championship will not be the only championship in IMSA competing at Sebring this weekend. We'll be having the Mustang Challenge, Porsche Carrera Cup North America, Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and Michelin Pilot Challenge racing there this year as well. But no Mazda MX-5 Cup, unfortunately, after they put on a fantastic finish again at Sebring last year. But still plenty of support series action to follow this weekend. Plenty of on-track action for me to cover. Early mornings, late nights. And you can get a preview of some of those races over on your podcast too, Four Doors and GT4s, which you do with Aaron Pfeiffer. So go check that out if you want some more information on those support races we'll see this weekend. We do have also a couple of special liveries joining us for this race so far.
All announced really last minute, it felt like.
As they were last year, I think.
Were they? Okay.
I mean, usually I don't think we've seen the liveries really, the special, especially the Mobile One liveries, until they rolled up at Sebring, I think, last year.
Yeah, that's true. I guess most of them are.
Was it 2021 Corvette had the silver and white and the silver and red Corvettes? I think it was 21.
Yeah, was that the last year of GTLM, or was that 22?
It was the last of GTLM, so it would have been, yeah. I think it was that year.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, a couple of special Mobile One liveries, this being the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring. We have Corvette with a wildly different livery than we're used to. Usually we're seeing those cars with the Corvette, what do they call it, Velocity Yellow livery. This year we'll be seeing them sort of in a white, blue, and red Mobile One outfit. And then we also have a small modification on the Wayland Cadillac as well, car 31, just with some Mobile One accent colors on the back of their car as well. BMW will be running a special livery on the M Hybrid V8 car 25, but not for Mobile One. It's to celebrate the 50th anniversary of BMW North America, sort of paying homage to some of their more notable victories in IMSA in the past. And Meyershank Racing, of course, updating some of their liveries, or updating both of their liveries as well a little bit, especially car 60 looking a little bit different than it was at Daytona, or quite a bit different, I would say, than it was at Daytona about a month and a half back. You have a favorite out of any of these so far?
I mean, honestly, I don't think any of them look bad. Which is always good. You don't want your car to go out there and look bad. Um, I mean, I do like the Corvette. I think
Yeah.
it looks really clean, the white with that blue, and it's probably going to look really good, all dirtied up after 12 hours at Sebring. So, um, I think those cars are stand out to me. But I also kind of like the 60 that you said as well. It kind of has, can't remember what that sponsor is, but it's like a little
Yeah.
bot
Ask
thing.
ROI.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of like the look of that car. So
Yeah.
some solid liveries though. You
Yeah. I'm quite excited to see the BMW on track. I think that that
yeah.
livery looks pretty nice as well. But of course, we got a lot more to talk about this race than just the liveries. This will be the IMSA debut, as we teased earlier, of that Aston Martin Valkyrie. Uh, they've got a 12-hour endurance test ahead of them here. And I sort of mentioned in the title of this podcast, I think this race really is IMSA's real endurance test. You can argue that. You could say it is the 24 Hours of Daytona. Of course, you have twice as much time for a car to run into some issues there. But this historically has been a track where IMSA teams have gone to shake down their cars because of how physical it is. I would argue this is probably the most physically demanding track that IMSA goes to this year. And then you add on the fact that this is their second longest race of the season. There's no stranger to some reliability issues here. Let's just say that much. So very curious to see how that Valkyrie stacks up here. At Qatar, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but this is a completely different championship. They'll be running to slightly different BOP levels against slightly different cars. So interested to see how they get around here. Again, I'm not expecting too much out of that car. I think, again, this is going to be another one of those get the car to the finish. Let's see what we can do. I think this is going to be a race of whether it's mechanical attrition or just, let's just say, carnage for some of the other GTP cars, where maybe they can capitalize on that if they can just remain clean the entire race. That's really where I would be expecting to see Aston at the end of this race. Maybe creeping up into the, like an 8th place finish, 8th, 7th, 8th would be a big win for them, I think. We'll see how it fares for them, though.
Okay, so you I guess if you're thinking that they could, it's not out of the equation that they could make it, past 9-10 hours of this race. Then would you say?
No, I wouldn't say so. It's very difficult to know for sure, though.
Yeah.
Because I've gone into this race in the past and said, yeah, this is a race where you're going to see cars rattled to bits. And then they make it through perfectly fine. No issues
Like
whatsoever.
Lamborghini last year.
Exactly. I think I said the same about Lamborghini last year. I think not on this podcast, but I think just to other people, I was saying the same about BMW in 2023. They got a podium here in 23. So it's a little bit difficult to judge, but it is going to be, I think, the big test for Aston this year. It's going to be this race, and it's going to be the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But of course, this one is only going to be their second race of the season. They have a lot less to work with going in. So interested to see how they hold up here. I'm hoping for the best for them, of course, because the longer that car's on track, the longer I get to hear a Cosworth 312. So as far as I'm concerned, that's only a win for the fans.
That's true. Big win for the fans. The longer that car stays out on track, I'm sure the in-person attendance is going to be larger than the first race of that car's life. But
Touche.
yeah, yeah. I think if you were to tell Aston Martin that they come out of this weekend, maybe they're a lap down or something, a couple laps down, but they completed all 12 hours. That's what they're rolling in here to do. It's a 12-hour test, get some more miles under it, help prove out some more reliability in that car for, like you said, Le Mans later this summer, and try and work out those gremlins that they had at Qatar. But everybody else in this class, they are not going to be looking to just ride this out. They're going to be looking to extract a good finish out of this race for sure.
Yeah. Well, one of the talking points we had for this race last year is how many yellows there were. Am I right in saying there were like 12 or 13 full course yellows last year? I can't remember the exact number, but it was a lot.
Yeah,
You you might be able to
Yeah, it
pull
was.
it up,
I think 11. It might have been 11 because I think it was just under 1 per hour.
yeah.
But I can look.
So to me, especially with IMSA's wave around rules, does Aston fall out? Do they fall multiple laps down? Or can they stay just in the way that this race usually pans out? Are they going to be able to stay on the lead lap the entire race because of how often those yellows might be coming out? One of the talking points I made is how often we have a late race full course yellow here.
Yeah.
Last year, of course, we had that incredible finish, that grandstand finish between Wayne Taylor Racing and the Cadillac. But I don't know. Are we going to have something like that again here this year? Or is this going to play out a little bit more, we'll say more naturally, where you have a longer green flag run?
Yeah. Yeah. Last year we had 12 full course yellows and 3 of them in the last hour and 20 minutes. Which is kind of par for the course that we've seen in recent Sebring races, right? It was last year we didn't have cars go bowling as you said earlier, but it was the year before that, the first year of GTP, that we had that really big wreck in the closing minutes of the race that took out a bunch of the leaders. So there's always a lot of full course yellows in this race. It's not just for accidents. Of course, there are a ton of mechanical failures that happen, and there's parts of the track, if you just get stuck there, like you can't make it to one of the cutouts in the wall. So expect there to be more full course yellows. Hopefully it's fewer than what we had last year. Hopefully we can see some drawn out green flag runs, but at the end of the day, when you put, I think it's 56 cars is what we have on the entry list this year, and put 56 cars out around Sebring, there are going to be breakdowns. There are going to be accidents. So buckle up, because it's not over till it's over. We've seen that time and time again with this track and this race.
Yeah. So I think, to me, if you ask, the ultimate objective here, as people in the chat are pointing out, is just survive, because I wouldn't rule out I don't want to say a last minute yellow, but in the last hour, I think certainly there's a fairly high chance that we have a full course yellow. The other thing that you didn't really include in there when you're talking about why we get yellows often here is just bits falling off the car. We've had, how many debris yellows alone did we have last year, where there was just a small piece of debris on the racing line?
Wow.
But this track has so many fast corners. It's not an especially large track for 56 cars on the grid. You can't get any breaks in traffic to send marshals out to recover those.
That's true. As long as the Fords have the boot issues fixed this year, then we should be better on that front, I think.
Yeah.
I say that, and now there's going to be a different car that has all sorts of issues.
But I think, to a point, as I said, this race is just about survival. I look at the 18 Aero Motorsport P2 car last year. They were like a couple laps down at one stage, weren't they? And then, of course, found their way back up front from some late race yellows. And then I think they cycled out towards the front in the last pit stop of the race. And then that drive to the finish really solidified the deal there. To me, if you can survive the first 11 hours here, the pace that you have in the final hour is going to matter the most. So you have to look at who's got a car that is going to have the best performance at nighttime, I think, is usually the way this race pans out.
Yeah.
So I'll try to use that influence when I'm making my predictions here. But
smart.
But that's pretty much the way I see this race going. I say that to say I hate to say it, but I don't think what we're going to see pace-wise in the first 3 quarters of this race really matters too much.
No.
You can love it or hate it. You can say that that's not in the true spirit of endurance racing if you want, but ultimately, that's what this race has come down to in previous years.
That being said, though, it's not like they're going to be just kicking their
No,
feet up and relaxing either.
no,
Like it is going to be a managed pace, right? It's not going to be they're not pushing 110% like they're going to be in the final couple hours, but it's yeah, it, it'll just be a little bit more relaxed, and hopefully there's not as many full course yellows that reflect, some of that. Hopefully some patience is shown in the first 3/4 of the race.
yeah,
One thing I wanted to mention too, while we were kind of on that topic of full course yellows,
sure.
and something that we saw play out a little bit last year, is going to be pit strategy when it's boiling down to like those final the final hours of the race. Depending on what the strategy guys and gals on top of the box are seeing and predicting, that could have a big impact, in all the classes really. But we oftentimes see some of this fuel mileage strategy play out in some of the GTD classes. So especially there, if you're running in 10th or something, it's a 20 or a 22 car class in GT, 20 entries this year. If you're running in 10th or so around the back of the lead lap, you're gonna throw that Hail Mary. And at Sebring, it's a track with the late full course yellows that we've talked about, could definitely pay off big time. So definitely something to keep an eye on here in the closing stages of the races, is how that fuel strategy and pit strategy is playing out.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also a couple storylines that I want to carry on from Daytona, to look forward to in this race. Of course, one of those being Lamborghini with their SC63. Did not have a Daytona to remember.
No.
Early race reliability issue there. Car retired.
Lamborghini as a whole.
Yeah, 124th the way into the race. Looking to make it a little bit more this time around, but that car's been honestly very hit or miss. There's been results where it surprised me for good ways and results where it surprised me for bad ways. But there's also been races where it has shown good pace. So I am curious to see where it stacks up here. Of course, hopefully it doesn't go as poorly as it did at Daytona, but if they can make it the distance, then perhaps they're a car that we can maybe look at being in the top 5 later on in the race, maybe a podium as well. Would be a big result for that team. This is, of course, Riley's second race with that car. They got that car really late this year, so didn't have a whole lot of time to prep it for Daytona. They've had the past, 6 weeks since then to really work with that car a lot more than they did before Daytona. So hoping for the best for that one, but I'm interested to see how that fares. And then also, people are already mentioning it, but we had of course, drama in GTD Pro between Paul Miller Racing and Corvette Racing.
Yep.
Do we get a little bit more of that going on here? Of course, this is a track that sort of encourages that style of racing a little bit, especially in the final hour. Get your nose out a little bit. And we've seen that in the final hour between Corvette and BMW. I'm thinking back to 2020, was it 21 with the last year of GTLM?
Yeah.
We saw that late race drama between those two manufacturers. So get a little bit of that carrying on here, maybe. I'm not sure, but again, wouldn't be surprised if it pops up at some point during the race.
Yeah, the cameras will be focusing on that battle if they find themselves close together in this one. And as the racing gods usually do, they will, Corvette and BMW will likely find themselves very close together throughout most of this race. That's usually how it works.
Yeah. All right. If you don't have anything else to add on here, I think it's time we throw some darts at the board.
Oh boy.
We got 4 different classes to work through here, and then that bonus pick as well. Don't know if you had a ton of time to think about it, but I've stolen your picks before. So I figured I'd be gracious and let you take GTP first today.
You're gonna let me take GTP first, eh? Well, that is very generous. Um, yeah, I've thought about this. I'll have to think of the bonus pick on the fly, but that's no problem. Um, the car that I'm looking at here in the GTP class is the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac. This is the kind of the entry in a way that won this race last year. It was, of course, the 40 Acura. Brendan Hartley wasn't in the lineup, which is a Brendan Hartley coming in to this lineup after Alex Lynn is unable to compete in this race, joining Jordan Taylor and Louis Delatraz. This is a car that looked good at the Rolex. We were kind of wondering, was it going to take Wayne Taylor Racing a little bit of time to get up to speed with the new car? It didn't. They came out and performed well. Cadillac did really well in this race last year, even though they didn't get that end result. That 31 was on rails in that race. And if it hadn't been for the accident with the Ferrari, they had to be the favorites to win that. I am squarely looking at Cadillac and specifically the number 40 entry for the win here.
I really like that one because I was considering it earlier, but I ended up picking somebody different because I was talking earlier, late race, who's going to have the most pace when it comes down to that inevitable final hour yellow. And by the way, now that I just threw that out in the air, we're going to have like a 6-hour green flag run to the finish. I like the 25 BMW here. They were strong manufacturer at Daytona. We were talking about how they were pretty strong pace at Qatar as well. I think we're going to see a lot of that carry on here. Obviously, sister car fell short at Daytona this year, but this is going to be a race for BMW. I think especially raw pace-wise, I think they're going to have the car to beat. Call it a gut feeling. I'm not putting a lot of thought into these picks this year because it hasn't worked for me in the past. But if it comes down to a final half-hour dash, I think they're going to be probably the car to beat. Generally, the cooler temperatures, if you even consider 86 degrees cooler at night or whatever it's going to be this year, are generally a little bit favored over some of their naturally aspirated counterparts. We saw that maybe play hand in the 40 car being faster than the Cadillacs at the end of the race last year. So that's what I'm going to go with on this one. I think BMW is finally going to break through and get another IMSA win here, which would be their third IMSA win and also all three at endurance races. So
that's a solid pick, and BMW is going to be one that's to keep a very close eye on this race. I mean, they broke through with that big proper cross the finish line first win at Indy last year, and not just a win but a 1-2. They roll into the first race this year at Daytona with some strong pace, and then this is a big race for them to back it up. If they back up the pace that they showed at Daytona and prove that they are going to be podium contenders race in and race out, then we're not really talking about BMW as, maybe they'll find their way onto the podium here at some point. There's work to do. You're all of a sudden talking about them as championship threats potentially. So big race here for BMW to prove that they really are taking those next steps and continuing to improve on their performance.
Yeah. All right, LMP2. I just realized I stuck myself with picking them first, which is always a typical one to go for.
A lot of good entries in LMP2. It's there's 12 entries this year, so it's still a very healthy class number. There's no additions from the Rolex, but we saw the racing product at Daytona, and we talked about how difficult it was to pick one standout car in this class. It's really not possible. Lots of good stories here. Kaku Ota, who was in GTP at the Rolex, he's running with Era in this race. I think there's another race that he's supposed to run with them at some point this year. I don't think that one's been confirmed yet. But good to see him. continuing to refine his craft here in IMSA.
Yeah, definitely good.
Hopefully I delayed a little bit there for you.
Good shout there. I already, like I said, I'm just throwing darts here because the more I put thought into these picks last year, the less it worked for me, and I'm already one for how many picks do I have total this year? Not counting the bonuses, I suppose it'd be 1 for 6 this year. So I'm doing better, I think. I'm gonna go with the 43 Inter Europol. I don't think I picked them for Daytona. I can't remember who I picked there. Tom Dillman, Bijoy Gargan. We have a new addition for a bronze driver of Jeremy Clark for this race, replacing John Field. Interesting one there, but of course it's the car or the team that won the championship in this class last year. And why not?
That's fair. That's a strong lineup that they have there. Garg as the silver driver, Dillman as the golds. That's certainly a lineup that you could see doing well. I personally am going to go with a car that I've picked many times, and they still haven't found their way to the top step of the IMSA LMP2 podium. But I think that Sebring is finally the race. The number 74 Riley entry of Gar Robinson, Felipe Fraga, and Josh Burden. A strong run at the Rolex. They're just consistent in a class that can go south very quickly. If the bronze driver's having a bad time, then it can go south very quickly. Gar is definitely one of the more consistent bronze drivers that we see in LMP2, and it's a difficult pick, but I think that Riley breaks through for a big LMP2 win.
One of these days they'll do it, I guess, huh?
It's going to be the time that I don't pick them.
Yeah.
Sorry, Riley, not this time.
Other notables here, I would give a shout to Pratt and Miller. 73 car, very strong at Daytona. Of course, they got sort of taken out in that mid-race incident with the giant pileup that we had there. But I like the driver lineup in that car, and I'd certainly expect good things out of them this race as well. So just another one I wanted to give a shout to, even though they're not my actual pick.
You want to talk about one that's going to be hungry, the number 8, after what happened, the fallout of Daytona. Like, they are going to have a spark lit under them for this one. It's a team that, won this race 3 years ago. I can't remember when it was that they came back from that early accident and won the class, but they are going to be very motivated to have a strong run in this class.
Yeah, that would have been 2023 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it was 2023. Yeah.
All right, how about GTD Pro?
GTD Pro. Well, I said it earlier. I said that racing has a funny way of having rivals or rivalries. Bringing incidents back to the surface and putting the participants isn't the word I'm looking for, but putting those guys close together in the race. I think that the GTD Pro battle is going to come down to another BMW versus Corvette showdown. But give me the number 3 Corvettes, Antonio Garcia, Alex Sims, and Danny Hucadea. They're strong at the Rolex. We talked about, is this the year that we see Corvette break out? They had their learning season last year, and it certainly looked like this could be the start of a breakout at the Rolex. So give me the number 3 Corvette in GTD Pro.
Like it. I think I had picked the 4 for Daytona, so similar idea. And of course, a lot of storylines for them going into this race. I'm going to go on a storyline of redemption, though. I think this is going to be a race for Pfaff Motorsports and the Lamborghini. Of course, this is a race that was just so disappointing for them last year. Got taken out right away at the start of the race here. Daytona, of course, got caught up there as well. And really, we saw a lot of pace out of that car at Daytona this year. So I would expect some of that to continue here at Sebring with that new Lamborghini program this year. So I'm going to go with FAF for this one. I think they're going to be able to redeem that disappointing result here last year and come out with a race win.
I obviously like that. Being a FAF homer myself, I was gonna put them in my bold prediction. I will not do that anymore. But yeah, FAF Lamborghini also looked pretty strong around here last year. I think they finished like fourth or fifth in GTD Pro, and then had a fifth place run in GTD. So could be a solid little track for them. And like you said, yeah, FAF looked pretty good at Daytona, despite only getting like half the race in.
And the ever elusive GTD class. Who do you want to pick in GTD? This is always such a toss up. I mean, there's just
sharpen your darts because you're throwing a dart.
At the end of the day, that's it. I'm throwing a dart. I'm gonna go with Old Reliable, 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. It's usually either them, or I'll go and pick one of the Vassar Sullivan Lexi. And I think you have the same strategy as well usually. So I'm gonna go with Old Reliable on this one. Not gonna go too ambitious with it. Of course, you don't need to talk too much about the history of Heart of Racing and the results they've been able to achieve in the GTD class in IMSA. So keep it simple on that one as well, and go with them for this race.
That's a good one. I like that. That's again, you said it. You can't go wrong with the Heart of Racing prediction here. That's the GT car that they're running full time in IMSA this year. They're not running a GTD Pro effort. Instead, they're focusing those resources on the Valkyrie. So, you gotta like the 27 here. I am going with this is a little bit more of a. I think it would be considered a long shot, but hear me out here. I'm gonna go with the 021 Triarsi Competizione entry. So this is a Ferrari. So we know that the Ferrari is well proven out at this point. They had some bad luck at the Rolex. They actually were the ones that the BMW made contact with late in the race that caused the front of that BMW GTP to be rattling around and lose a bunch of pace. But they ran into the 021 and kind of ended their race pretty well on the spot. So I like the 021 to bounce back. But one of the things that I really saw with this car towards the end of last year is ever since Stephen McAleer was introduced into this sort of pairing with Sheena in the full season capacity, they see the performance really picked up. They had some strong runs. They got on a podium at Road America. They had some strong runs through the rest of the season. Triarsi is gaining some more experience. They've have plenty of IMSA experience now. I have a good feeling about Triarsi and that 021. We saw the Ferraris do well in this race last year. You might recall the Risi Competizione battle with Vassar Sullivan for the GTD Pro win. And then the third driver in this lineup, as a silver driver, if you're getting Mike Skeen in your lineup, that's a pretty solid silver to have behind the wheel as well. So I like the 021 Triarsi Ferrari in this one. A little bit of a long shot, but it's GTD. Anything can happen.
Yeah, anything's a long shot there. No, I think it's fun. Go a little bit wild there, and I do like Triarsi. I think they're a solid team with a solid car and a solid driver lineup, like you said. So while it may be a little bit of a long shot, I don't think it's anything extremely ambitious. I certainly think any team, running those Ferraris is definitely not out of contention.
I guess that leaves us with bold predictions,
Leaves
right?
you with the bonus, huh? I will let you take this one first as well. Since I guess I stole one of yours.
Yeah, this is actually I do like AMR fan 95 in the chat threw out DXDT. I think that's a solid one as well.
Yeah, one I was looking at for sure.
Yeah, he also mentioned that Corvette always, or they always also mentioned that Corvette is always strong at Sebring. So
Yeah.
that has definitely played out as well over the years. So not a bad thought there. Oh man, bold prediction though. I'm kind of teetering between a couple. Okay, I think I think that my bold prediction, again, it may not be that bold, but give me the number 60 Meyershank Racing Acura to have back-to-back podiums to start the season. They looked really good at the Rolex. I think that they can carry that through. They have a very veteran lineup here of Tom Blomqvist, Colin Braun, and Scott Dixon behind the wheel. Strong lineup. The car obviously performed here well last year with the 40 winning it. So yeah, I'll take a little bit bold, but definitely still a bit bold. The 60 gets back to back podiums in Meyershank Racing's return to IMSA.
I like it. I like it. It's a bit safe, but this isn't
Yeah,
really a bold prediction, anyways. It's all about just getting a bonus out there, so we have an
exactly.
extra chance to be either right or wrong. Usually wrong. Um, I am going to go bold on this one though, because
Ooh,
bold's fun. Why not? Just go a little crazy sometimes. I've said a couple of times I do think this is going to come down to a late race yellow, and I do think the car driver combo at the end of that is going to be very important. So with that in mind, I'm going to say JDC Miller Motorsports. Same
oh,
vein here. Um, I think they are going to get a podium here as well. So you're sort of going
okay.
with the same idea as I am here. Jimmy Bruni, Timon Vanderhelm, and they have a new addition for this race. Nico Muller, new Porsche factory driver. Think you get a guy like that in the finish for the closing stint of this race. If we have a yellow with less than 30 minutes remaining, definitely not a driver and car to count out here. They, of course, won this race back in 2021 when they were running the DPI class with Cadillac. And I've been longing for success for a privateer in IMSA since the GTP class came out. So perhaps this is a good shot to finally get that. Maybe not quite a race win, but I'm going to say a podium for JDC Motorsports with their 963.
I like it. JDC they picked up a podium. I think it was at Indy last year after the Porsche was disqualified. I believe.
Can't remember.
I
I'll
believe
take
that
your word for it.
I believe that Proton got promoted to third place in that race. So yeah, wait, did I say Proton? I mean JDC.
Yep.
So yeah, JDC, the probably the smallest team, probably without a doubt, that's in the GTP class, but like they make the most of what they got. They won Sebring in DPI, I believe, didn't they, with the
Yeah.
Mustang sampling car?
Yeah. That's what I was
Yep.
pointing to in 2021 with
Oh,
Bourdais in that final stint. Getting a race win there in 21. Yeah.
there you go. I like that. That's bold, but that's a solid one. I like that.
Yeah. Gonna go over to a couple of these questions before we wrap up the episode. Actually, no. I want to say one more thing about Sebring before I get there. Um, I will be at Sebring this year. If anybody is at the track and you see me around, I'll be doing some video stuff there, not necessarily for my channel, but helping out with some video content. So if you see me around with a green photo vest, go give me a shout. I'll be sure to stop by and you can yell at me and tell me how wrong I was with my predictions. But when they're all inevitably DNF'd by the race in the race by that point. Um, but just wanted to get that out there. I said a thing to old mate Andrew Kissinger today from Brian Hurd Autosport. I said, Sebring, it's always hot. It's always humid, unnecessarily hot and humid in early/middle March, might I add. It's like 90 degrees forecasted for race day, and it's Florida, so it's always humid. And you're over an hour away from the track to stay in essentially any hotel. And you have to get to the track very early, and you got to leave the track very late at night. But this is one of the staples of North American endurance racing. has been for the better part of 100 years. Close, not quite, but the better half of 100 years at this point. I think we're on the 72nd running this year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're
Um,
right.
so this is just one of those big races in North American endurance racing, and really happy to be back there in person for the first time since 22. Um, and yeah, be sure to talk about some of the experiences there in the next episode. Now I'll move it on to some of the questions here. If I don't hit all of them, I do apologize. Again, we're trying to keep things a little bit brief here, but I will make sure to go over some of the ones that have been asked already. Have you heard that Honda is looking to enter the Acura in the LMDH class? Also, Audi might make a third gen R8, maybe a new GT3 LMS. I have heard David Salters is sort of being a little bit more vocal. HRC US lead, by the way, David Salters.
Very tall man.
Yeah,
Very tall.
and sort of hinting that he wants to see the ARX 06, especially racing Le Mans, which would mean it would have to race in the World Endurance Championship in the future. This has always been a decision that has weighed on Honda Global. And now that we have that unification of what used to be HPD with Honda Racing Global or Honda Racing Corporation, we've always thought that we're a little bit closer to it than we were before. So yeah, I'm curious if we see them on the grid, maybe the World Endurance Championship next year. I'm not quite sure who would run that program, but it sounds like that's sort of what they're working towards. We'll say that much. So whether it's 26, 27, hopefully we'll see them on the grid in the World Endurance Championship in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And whether it's under the Honda brand or the Acura brand worldwide, we'd have to see. And then as for Audi, have seen rumors that I've seen, of course, the recent rumors that were coming out of them doing a partial or hybrid electric vehicle supercar sort of thing, using the next generation Lamborghini V8 as sort of a base for that. I take it at a grain of salt. I mean, Audi has been flipping a little bit back and forth recently. I've also seen people saying that rumor is not true. So I'm not too sure. I'm not very deep in the auto market itself, but if it were to race, of course, I would welcome it racing in the GT3 category worldwide. I think that's one of the biggest losses to me for Audi Sport when they really pulled the plug on customer racing, is we're not seeing as many Audi R8s racing worldwide anymore. And that car is still eligible to race. We still do see some of them in GT World Challenge this year, and racing over at the Nürburgring in the 24 there as well. But I lost Stu here. But of course, would love to see them come back in some capacity. I don't know what happened here. But we're back. It kicked both of us off. I'm gonna hope that that everything's working there, but be sure to let me know if it's not. Yeah, like I was saying, I would of course welcome seeing them back in GT3 in any capacity, but we'll have to see. Their motorsports structuring right now has definitely been changed quite a bit over recent years.
I think they just rolled out the last what is it, the R8?
Yeah, not too long ago. It was last fall.
Yeah. So probably you're gonna see fewer and fewer of them on the grid going forward, probably. But that would be cool if Audi came back. Would be definitely well received by the fans.
Yeah. And then Mr. Waffle sort of tying off that a little bit. I don't really know what HRC's excuse is now that WTR is going to Le Mans. They have an engine program in F1, not an entire team. These other teams have dual programs. Look, I'll say this much. If Honda / Acura were able to enter Le Mans exclusively without running the full World Endurance Championship, I think they would have done it years ago.
Yeah.
Of course, that isn't an option for them. They would have to commit to a full season. They'd have to find a partner to run full time in the WEC. And I think that really is the big challenge for them. So, don't really know if it's so much of an excuse as it is just something they need to continue to work towards. Because it's definitely not a small undertaking to run a program in the World Endurance Championship. And don't forget, they would need to run 2 cars in that championship now as well. So minimum 2 cars full time in a World Championship to go race at Le Mans at all, I think is really what it boils down to them. So we'll see if they're able to make their way around that. Looking through the rest here.
Lots of predictions.
Yeah, quite a few predictions for the race. GTP goal survived the last 10 minutes. Yeah, of course, if it comes down to a 10-minute race to the finish,
Oof.
sort of what we saw like last year, then yeah, don't get shoved off track, I guess is the only goal at that point.
Ota won in Super Formula last weekend.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, racing over there full time in their championship. Yeah, I think you mentioned how it's nice to see him racing in the LMP2 class here. Definitely agree with that. He was sort of a bold choice, let's say, to put in straight into GTP machinery. That was his first race in a prototype period, I believe, unless he had some experience prior in the European or Asian Le Mans series. I don't believe so, though. But certainly first race in that top level hypercar / LMDH machinery. So bold for putting him in the car at Daytona, but we saw that he was definitely a fast driver there, and excited to see what he can do in an LMP2 car at Sebring. Will IMSA announce the 2026 schedule, do you think? They announced it at Sebring last year. What changes would you like to see? This is a good question, actually, because I forgot they announced the Sebring, or not the Sebring, the 25 schedule so early last year.
Yeah, it was a surprise last year that they I haven't heard anything. If there's anything coming, I haven't looked at like the full schedule either to see if there's any weird announcements that are mystery announcements that are blocked off, but. I suppose it's possible, although I wouldn't really be expecting to see many changes. We've seen the same schedule for the last couple of years, but one of the things, if they, again, we don't know if the schedule is going to be announced, but if it were, then maybe one of the things that you could see changed is the races that the LMP2s are going to be present at. A lot of the teams last year had some complaints about being off basically from Sebring until Watkins Glen. So it's a long gap. And I think it was 3.5 months or something like that. So maybe not quite that. No, not quite that much, but like a good 3 months. So maybe you could see some changes there, but we'll have to keep our eyes out. Maybe there'll be an announcement.
Yeah, you got to remember IMSA did that last year to really get ahead of the curve with all the other championships they're trying to not clash with. So they were really the first ones out last year. And the problem is it didn't work entirely because we still have a scheduled clash with the Nürburgring 24 this year, if I'm not mistaken, and the 6 hours at the Glen. So.
And there's WEC clashes still.
Yeah, it's it is what it is. It's modern day sports car racing. You're gonna have the problem with the sports car racing booming right now, as much as it is globally across multiple different categories. We talk about the prototype boom, but also GT3 is as strong as I don't want to say as strong as it's ever been. I think arguably it's been maybe a little bit stronger in previous years, but still very close to that summit. There's just so many races worldwide that these drivers are taking part in, and of course. Some of those things are out of their control entirely, like the Spa 24 date had to move up for Formula 1 at Spa. So it is what it is. You're never going to be able to avoid those conflicts 100%. But that is what IMSA was trying to accomplish last year. It didn't necessarily have any dramatic change on those scheduled clashes in the end, so I don't know if they're going to take the same approach this year or not. For personal, selfish reasons, I guess I would say if there's one thing I could bring back, it would be a GT race at Lime Rock Park. I know it wasn't a fan favorite for some people and for some of the teams on the grid. I know that's also a difficult track with accommodations like Sebring, but it's a track that I got into IMSA at back in 2008, so I would love to see a return there. But that's just me being selfish. Anyways, I think I'm gonna. Oh, sure.
There's one more question, and I don't know the answer to it. Could HRC go to Le Mans if they win the championship in IMSA?
No, because they
Okay.
still have to have a car racing full time. The team could get an invite. So if Meyer Shank
Ah.
Racing wins the championship in IMSA, they'll get an invite as a team. They can go race in an LMP2 car. They can
Okay.
go find some LMGT3 car that runs full time in the World Endurance Championship, but they cannot enter a car that is a one-off manufacturer, and that applies to both LMGT3 and Hypercar.
There we go.
So wishful thinking, and they have raced at Le Mans. They were there back in 2016
They were.
in the LMP2 class as well.
When they first started their relationship with Honda, I think that was the first
Right.
year.
Yep. But no, unfortunately, they couldn't go over there with their ARX-06.
That's too bad.
So
That'd be a cheating way in.
it would be, it would be incentive for them to win the championship for sure. But
It would. Yeah, if My Shank Racing wins the wins the GTP championship, how soon after do the WEC season entries close? Do they throw together, a
well,
program
the
for
IMSA
that?
season ends so late.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the problem with it is.
Well, I guess if they were full time in the WEC, then they wouldn't have to worry about that automatic entry, anyways. They'd just be in it.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Do you have any closing thoughts for this episode? I think I'm going to wrap it up here, but of course,
Yeah.
I'll give you the floor for one last time. We've got Sebring this weekend. Anything else you want to throw out there?
I mean, it's not going to be over until it's over this weekend. Don't leave your couch in the final hour.
Unless you're on the one that they burn in the hairpin.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, leave your couch as soon as the race is over, especially if you're at the track, because don't get put on fire. If you're at the track, we saw it with the wreck last a couple years ago. Things get rowdy in there, but don't take any pieces of the car unless if you're explicitly given permission by the team. That should be a no-brainer, though. The people listening to this aren't going to be the problem. But yeah, don't leave your couch in the final hour of the race. It's going to be a fun one, as always. It's all our predictions are going to go up in the air, and I'm sure we're going to be treated to a great race.
Yeah. I've said everything I wanted to say already. Very much looking forward to being back there. I've got plenty to discuss, not next week. I am extending my stay in Florida a little bit, as you did after Daytona this year. But we'll be back in a couple of weeks on Tuesday night to recap the race, go over any news stories that we've had come out in the meantime, and answer some of your questions. So for now, I want to thank everybody who tuned into this episode, whether you are here live or on a podcasting platform. Hope you enjoy the 12 hours of Sebring, and hope to see you in 2 weeks. Take care.